Cleaning and sanitising our surfaces is all part of our initial preparation. We call this mise en place, which is French for putting in place. So as well as cleaning and sanitising, we have washed our hands, we've put our hair up into a bun, ideally. We're wearing an apron, or in my case, chef's whites, and we are doing all of this in order to prevent cross-contamination, which is preventing bacteria in the environment from getting into our food and potentially causing us illness like stomach upsets and so on. So as well as that, we want to collect our ingredients and our equipment. So let's do that now. The first thing that we are going to discuss is cleanliness and hygiene, because before we can get into making any food, of course we need to make sure that we are working hygienically. So I'm over by the tap and we're going to run half a bowl of hot soapy water. Now we're going to run half a bowl because when you come to doing your washing up later, you can always add to it. You can add some more hot water, you can add a little bit more soap if necessary, but what you don't want to do is of course obviously waste water. If you have a full bowl of water and you're working for half an hour or so, it will cool down in that time. So the best thing to do is to start with half a bowl of hot soapy water. So I'm going to run my tap, and I've got some generic liquid. You don't need very much, like so. That'll be plenty. Just going to wait for that to fill up. Now, we also need a variety of ways of actually washing our cutlery and our crockery and our Tupperware. We need a few key utensils. So that's half a bowl. There we go, super. So the first thing that we need is a brush. Now, some people will think that a brush will do a sufficient job in cleaning everything. It really won't. We need it for specific methods of cleaning, in particular for cleaning round the inside of bowls or the inside of a saucepan, just to brush off the worst of the food material ready for it to go down the sink. Or to get into little crevices like in a grater for instance. But a brush is really useful, but it won't work on its own. Now this is my form of a scrubby. So in school we have sponges or green scrubbies. This is actually a plant, it's actually a loofah, and I choose this because it will completely biodegrade at the end of its life, and actually for the money I think they are fantastic. They last a lot longer than most conventional sponges. So we'll use that to actually scrub our saucepans, our bowls, our cutlery, whatever the case may be. We also need a washcloth to be able to clean and sanitize the surfaces. If you have a couple of other things as well, so wire wool can be really helpful, but never on Teflon coated saucepans, okay? Only for things like crockery or for stainless steel saucepans. I actually have, for more stubborn material to get off, this is actually a coconut husk. This is what I use to scrub my pans. I try not to use a steel wool very often unless it's really, really baked on. So something like that, again, like a green scrubby, and then I've got slightly different brushes as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is sanitize our surfaces. Now I have my washcloth here with hot soapy water, and I have my antibacterial spray. So the purpose of the soap in the washcloth is to remove grease, sugars, residues from the surface. The purpose of the antibacterial cleaner is to kill bacteria, because of course we don't want to introduce contamination into our food. So before we prepare, ideally we should be using both. So just 2 sprays, there we go, and a hot soapy cloth. And I'm going to wipe it all the way across. There we go. And I can just use a tea towel just to dry it off. A nice clean tea towel. That hasn't been around for days. Collecting bacteria, that's fresh from an hour ago. There we go. For this recipe, you are going to need 6 long or 10 short wooden skewers. If you have metal ones, that's okay, but wooden ones are preferable for a number of reasons. You'll need 1 packet of halloumi cheese, 250 grams or thereabouts. This one's 225, that's fine. If you're vegan or dairy intolerant, because I am in this case, tofu, firm tofu makes a great alternative. Not the silken tofu because it'll disintegrate. I have a smoked tofu here, or you could use a tempeh. If you also need a small bunch of fresh mint or dried herbs, I obviously have both here. And the mint makes this recipe. If you can get your hands on some fresh mint, please do, it's worth the effort. You'll need a lemon, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, some sea salt and some black pepper. And now you have a choice. Please pick 3 vegetables from the following selection. So you can have 1 pepper of any colour. I'm actually going to do half of both a red and a green, 1 courgette, 10 to 15 cherry tomatoes, 5 to 10 mushrooms, and 1 red onion. And this is the opportunity to try some different vegetables. So many young people say to me they don't like vegetables, but I always say you haven't tried them with the right seasoning yet. You haven't enjoyed them in their full potential. So this is the opportunity. Try something new. You might surprise yourself. The very first thing that we want to do is to place our skewers into a tray, and we want to add some cold water. Regardless whether you're doing this at home or you're doing this at school, please make sure that you are transferring your water in a jug. You're not going to carry your tray all the way across the room full of water, because what's inevitably going to happen? It's going to spill. So with a jug full of water, we're just going to pop that over the top of our skewers, just enough to cover them. There we go, that'll do. And the purpose of soaking our skewers, I wonder if you can work it out, is to prevent them burning in the oven. If you put wood in a fire, it's going to burn. So that's why we're going to soak them. It's going to prevent them from burning. So the first thing that we need to do is to drain the juice from our halloumi or our tofu. This is purely protective, it preserves it, which is great, but what we don't want to do is cut this open on our chopping board. It's going to make a mess. So if we do this over the sink, that would be a lot better idea. So I have my scissors, I'm just going to cut into it like so, underneath, and let the juice drain away. I'm going to do that for my tofu as well. Wanted to take the opportunity just to go through knives very briefly. The ones that I tend to use as a proficient cook at home are ones like this, which is a chef's knife, or known as a cook's knife. Big guy like this one, which is a santuku knife. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I love this guy, I use them all the time. We have other ones as well, like a bread knife, serrated, also a serrated knife for things like tomatoes, and even things like fish knives or paring knives, like these very small ones. But the ones that you need to worry about are vegetable knives, or also known as utility knives, because they're general use, they're used for lots of different things. So I actually have 2, you see they're very similar. I have one which is slightly longer and one which is slightly broader in the blade. So hopefully you have something like this at home, because that's what you're going to be using next. So I have my vegetable knife here, and we're going to cut this into approximately 2 centimetre cubes. Now, rather than trying to go along and trying to guess, get a ruler out, we want to make sure that all the pieces are about the same size. That's the key thing, because we want them to cook at the same rate. So in order to do that, I'm going to use my vegetable knife, my utility knife, and remembering that my fingers go on the side so it can hold itself, thumb goes on the side like so. I'm going to start with my bridge technique, and I'm going to cut it all the way in half. So I'm going to go half, 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 half and half until I have even sized pieces. like so. You can turn it round. I've now got a flat side to work on. Bridge all the way down. There we go. Now I'm going to cut this in half using my claw, and in half again. There we go. And I know that all the pieces are the same size. I'm going to do that for my other half now. Okay, and from here I'm going to place them all into a mixing bowl. And we're going to add all of our seasoning into here very soon. The next instruction is to cut the vegetables also into similar sized cubes when necessary, and also place into the bowl. Now for tomatoes, these are already about the same size, and although we tend to say if it rolls, cut it in half, and we cut it in half because then we have a flat side and we can work on it. Cherry tomatoes, in this case, not particularly essential, because actually they're very juicy and they're going to leak, and it would just be better if they're kept whole. So the only thing we need to do with these is rinse them in a sieve. So we can do that now. So I've rinsed these little guys in a sieve, and the only thing I need to do with them now is just pop them in my bowl. There we go. Okay, next to the peppers. Now I said I'm going to use half of a red pepper and half a green pepper because I like to eat the rainbow. I like to get as many beautiful, vibrant, colourful vegetables in as I can. So I'm going to do half of each. Now people have different methods of preparing peppers. Some people will cut them in half and then remove the seeds. Some people will cut into it like so and then pull out the central seed island, if you will. But I'm going to show you my method because I don't like interacting with the seeds at all. They get everywhere. It's not very appetizing to get one in your food. So the way I'm going to do is, to begin with, we're going to check on our knife. So as we said before, fingers on the side, you should be able to hold it on its own. Thumb comes down like a magnet, ready to go. And it's an extension of your arm. It's really strong that way, okay? Avoid putting your finger over the top. So I'm going to hold it, I'm going to use my claw, keep my fingers nice and clear, and I'm going to use a bit of a sawing action. And I'm going to cut all the way around, and I'm actually going to follow the contour of that pepper, all the way down to the bottom, like so. I'm going to do that for half my pepper. And you can see I'm getting a few seeds in there, but far fewer than if I'd cut into it entirely, and we can just remove those. So that's half my red, and we do half my green. Perfect. Now from here we want to have all our pieces about the same size as our halloumi. We don't want to have thin slivers, we don't want to have a dice, we want nice big pieces. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare it. Now, a lot of the time we say flat side down, okay, because then it won't move around, but actually peppers are the exception to the rule because the skin is very, very slippy and curved as well. So the knife doesn't have a lot to grip onto and you're more likely to cut yourself. The flesh on the inside though is really grippy. The knife doesn't have anywhere to go, you're going to find it a lot easier, so try it this way around. So I'm going to use the bridge, cut it in half, and I'm going to use the claw to cut it like so. I reckon that's not a bad size. I could go half of that maybe, but I like them a bit more on the big side for kebabs. There we go, do that one first. Now for the courgette. So I've already given it a scrub with my trusty vegetable scrubby. Because any time you eat the skin of something, you want to make sure you're giving it a good clean. Now this is probably the easiest one to do. I'm going to start at the end farthest away from the stalk. We just want to get rid of this little bit here because it's not very appetizing, it's very hard. So I'm just going to use the claw and just cut that free. Again, don't want to cut off very much. Let's try and reduce food waste. So I'm going to put that in my bits bowl that I have ready to go over here. And now I'm going to cut them into just rounds, about 2 or 3 times the thickness of a pound coin, like so. I want them chunky, okay? You don't want to go for thin little slivers, you want nice chunky pieces to match the others that you have, like your halloumi. Okay. Moving my fingers up as I go. Now these guys are really quite large, so in this case I might want to cut them in half. There we go. Perfect. Using my bridge technique. There we go. And I finish those off. Now the reason I leave the stalk till the end is so that I have something to hold on to. I've got all this lovely food on here, I don't want to waste that. I want to try and cut it as close to the stalk as I can, and I still have the stalk to hold on to, and that can go in my bits bowl. Now onto mushrooms. Now these can be a little bit fiddly to prepare, but they're actually quite satisfying. So the thing about mushrooms is that they grow very close to the soil, down to the ground. So they can often have bits of soil on the outside, so we need to remove that. Now we can either wash the mushrooms, but that will turn what's quite a dry food and kind of make it soggy, or we can peel it. But the only thing about peeling is that it takes a bit longer, so it's completely your preference. So if you want to peel it, you just get your thumb underneath and you can peel it off like so. Like I said, quite satisfying. There we go. Beautiful. If you want to wash it, you can just rinse it under the tap. So you can see the difference between the two. But the last thing that we need to do is to remove the leathery part off the end of the stalk. We don't want to take the whole stalk off because that would be wasting food. Perfectly edible. But what we want to do is just using our claw, it's just cut off the very, very end. Just a little bit leathery, not very appetising. And the rest of that, perfectly edible. So from here, we want, again, nice big chunky pieces to match our pieces that we've done so far. So for small mushrooms, they might go on whole. If it's a medium-sized mushroom like this, possibly just in half. There we go. If it's a particularly large mushroom, you might want to go in half again, into quarters. Completely your decision. You are the chef today. Okay, last one. I've left it the best till last. So for the onion in this case, for this week, okay, we prepare onions in different ways, but for this week, I'm going to prepare it in a very easy way. We're going to top and tail it. We're going to remove the stalk part here and the root part down here. So we're just left with the central section. So I'm going to cut it in half because if it rolls, what do? We cut it in half, okay, prevents it rolling around. So bridge, knife goes through like a choo-choo train, all the way down. There we go. And now I've got 2 flat sides. So using my claw, I'm going to hold onto it, remove the stalk and the root. And now I can peel it. Don't try peel it before. Promise you, this is so much easier. There we go. And the same for the other one. Good job so far, guys. Okay, we're nearly there. The last thing we want to do is just cut them in half using the bridge, like so. And they're going to go in as they are. They're going to just go in to our bowl. Look at this. Look how colourful and appetising this already looks. I'm really excited for this. But just to make it even better, we're going to add some fresh or some dry herbs. So let's start with the dry herbs. So for our dry herbs, I have my measuring spoons here. Hopefully you have a set similar to this at home. If you don't, a large spoon will suffice. But here I've got my 1 tablespoon measure, my tablespoon measure. So I'm going to, over the bowl, don't get it everywhere, I'm going to gently tip that in. There we go. And you'll know when your tablespoon is level that's 1 tablespoon. There we go, sprinkle that over. Fantastic. And now onto our fresh herbs. So we just want a small bunch. Try and go for the larger leaves. There we go. Leave that nice growth to come back up again. Now, if the stalk is very bendy, it's probably okay to include. If it's very woody, you might want to just pick the leaves free from it. Your preference. There we go. That already smells beautiful. I'm very excited. What we don't want to do is just stay here all day trying to cut 1 leaf at a time. It's going to take forever. The best thing to do is to grab a good bunch and put them all together and roll them all up like so. Now with my claw, remembering my fingernails are right underneath, they're touching the mint, I'm going to keep my knife nice and close. I'm going to move my fingers back as I go, slowing down as I get closer. And now I've got these beautiful little ribbons that I can add in. Alright, so we're very nearly there. The last thing that we need is 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm going to do it until it's level, then I know it's the amount. There we go. Place that to one side where it's not going to get on the surface. Then I'm going to add some black pepper. This is purely to taste. And then the last thing is to add some salt. Now the halloumi or the tofu will have a little bit of salt already added, but we can still be generous with our salt. A lot of people try and reduce their salt intake, but when you're talking about making fresh food, that's where you can be generous. We want to be able to taste these vegetables. We're going to think they're bland and we're not going to enjoy them as much. So do be reasonably generous with the amount of salt that you include. Add good, generous pinch like that. Perfect. The last thing that we need to do is to zest our lemon. You can omit the step, but the lemon really makes a difference, so if you have one spare, do use it. So we need to look at our grater. You probably have a box grater similar to this at home. We want to make sure we're using the right side. So this is a large grate for things like cheese, carrots. That's not going to work. This is a zester. This is the one we want. I have one which is sort of intermediate, and that's obviously a slicer. That's not going to work. So let's go back to the zester, this one here. And I'm going to take my lemon. I'm going to hold it with my fingers nice and clear. And I'm going to go up and down, and I'm going to rotate the lemon at the same time. I want to get a little band of each, because we just want the beautiful, rich, oily skin, and we don't want the pith underneath. The pith is the white part that we'll see in a second. So holding it up and down and rotating. There we go. Checking as I go. That is perfect. You don't want to see much more white than that. So this is the pith. It's very bitter. It will change the flavour and not be very appetising on our kebabs. So I'm going to rotate, and then I'm going to go up and down. There we go. Okay, there we go. So you can see I've taken off just the lovely skin and I haven't gone down too far on here. If you go down to the flesh, you've gone way too far. Make sure that you're only taking off the yellow part, okay? We don't want the pith. Now, to release it out of here, doesn't look like we have very much. That's because it's all caught up in the box grater. So you can put your hands on the inside, that's perfectly safe, don't worry about that. You can just scoop it out, there we go. Add that to my bowl. Now we'll have some on the outside as well. It likes to get stuck on there. Now, in order to remove this, there's a couple of different methods. If you have a pastry brush, you can use that to brush it off, but if you don't, I'll show you now. So the method I find easiest is to use a teaspoon. Now you can see that there's little channels up and down here, they go diagonally, okay, kind of like a racing car. And so I'm going to go up and down, remove the zest, and then back the other way. And now I can get my bowl and I can hold it upside down and give it a good tap, like so. Alright, now for the fun part. So I've drained the water from my tray and I have my skewers here ready to go. You might need to get an adult to help you remove the water, otherwise we don't want to make a mess. And what I like to do is I like to have one dirty hand and one clean hand, otherwise I'm going to get oil everywhere. So with all my lovely ingredients in here, I'm going to mix these all up, get everything coated in that oil, in that salt, in that seasoning, make everything delicious. There we go. So with my one dirty hand, I'm going to spear everything on. Please make sure that obviously we are not going to poke it all the way through with our fingers on the other side. Okay, it's going to be sharp, so keep your fingers clear and watch where it's going. There we go. All the way down to the bottom, just enough space to hold on to it, and then you can thread them on. I like to do it so that they alternate, makes it look even more appetizing. There we go. Now when you come to the onion, it's actually ideal if it sort of breaks off into these lovely little sheets, these little layers, because then you can spear those on. Fabulous, look at that. So appetizing already. I'm going to place that down on our tray. You might want to have a little piece of foil on there maybe, shiny side up to reflect the heat back, but otherwise, see you back in a minute. So here they are. They are so colourful, they're so appetising. Really looking forward to these. It's such a great way to eat the rainbow and get your portions of veggies in. And this really is a meal by itself, but if you want to have it as an accompaniment, you could have it with maybe, you know, some meat, barbecue would be great. So we're going to put them in the oven for around 10 to 15 minutes at 200 Celsius or gas mark 6, and make sure that you're just cooking the number that you want. The halloumi doesn't reheat very well, so in this case I'm just going to put them all in, but yeah, keep that one in mind. Okay, in they go. Coming back to hygiene, I'm going to do my washing up now while the kebabs are in the oven. And as I said before, we have our brush and we have our scrubby, and they serve different purposes. So with the zest side of the grater, I'm going to pop that in. I'm going to just keep my fingers clear, and I'm going to use the brush to scrub the zest off, like so. Because the brush gets in the gaps, it's perfect for it. That's what it's really good for. I could just rinse it, get rid of the suds, there we go, pop it down. Now with the, you're going to have a lot of oil on the inside of your bowl. And what you don't want to do is put that straight into your washing up, because that hot soapy water is quickly going to become warm, greasy water. So again, we go in with our brush, so we're going to get a little bit of water up in the bowl. Then we're going to get our brush, we're going to brush it all the way around, all up the sides, all the way around. Really try and get all of that off. There we go. And then that goes down the side, down the sink, because the the washing up liquid will break down the grease, and that's what it's really good for. And now it can go down the sink. So now that I've pre-washed it, now I can go in with my scrubby in the washing up, and I can clean the sides nice and thoroughly, all the way around. And round the lip as well, because sometimes we get oil around the sides. And just give that a quick rinse and let that drain. There we go. Wow, here they are. They look so good. They smell amazing, and I'm really looking forward to having these for my dinner. Hope you enjoyed making this with me. See you next time.